Welcome, Johnny, to Metallurium Pages again, but now this time is talking about For the Heads for the Dead, because previously we spoke about the last albums from Wombat. Now
Yeah.
we're talking about From the Heads for the Dead and this new album, Never Ending Night of Terror. A great album, by the way, great, amazing one. So, and in
Thank
this
you.
one, let's start as usually. So, how are you doing today? How is the band in the last couple years? And
Uh, yeah, all good today. A bit rainy and cold here. Winter is coming in the north of Europe here. So I'm actually in Norway now instead of Sweden like last time.
okay.
Uh, but yeah, we've been working ahead with some new songs and stuff like that, and trying to promote the new album as best as possible.
Hmm. Okay. So now, well, this new album, Never Ending and the Night of Terror, it was released with 3 years of difference for the previous three Great of Conjuration. So, and it does, when do you decide to start writing songs for this new album?
I actually had the foundation for these songs done maybe 2 years ago,
Mhm,
not that long after we released the last
mhm,
album, or when around the time for the EP I started. When we released the EP that came after,
mhm,
I started writing the songs and had the foundation done quite soon after.
mhm,
And we ended up working on the songs and then trying to fit the perfect time
mhm,
to release it all. Because as you know, there's a lot of bands releasing stuff quite close between the albums, and we wanted to have some breathe time between the albums and let the fans wanting some more.
mhm. Okay, okay, amazing. So now, well, let's talk about more about this now, the promotion of this new album, because obviously there is promotions with live presentations, with videos and more things related. So how will be the schedule to present the promotion for this new album? So perhaps you present more videos, and perhaps you do some gigs there, etc.
We don't have any gigs planned as of yet,
Mhm,
because we have been like a studio band. I don't want to
mhm,
call it a studio project because I don't like the term project that much, because a project sounds like it's something that you do on the side of everything else. But Heads for the Dead is one of the main bands for me, and then I know for the rest of the guys as well in the band. So we call it a studio band for now. But for the promotion so far for this album, we've partnered up with some really good YouTube channels that have
mhm,
premiered some of our songs,
mhm.
and we did a lyric video for Phantasmagoria as well.
Okay, okay. So now, well, if there's, for example, if there's any chance that the band will play some tours or gigs, how will you react? Because as the band is an international, so has members from different parts of the world. So how will you fix or how will you resolve this situation? Because there is there is a band in US, member in US, another member in Germany, etc., etc.
Well, with today's technology, it's quite easy to make it work.
Mhm,
Because since I have a studio of my own, I can record every part without taking away some parts for the persons that needs to rehearse for it. So, for
okay.
example, I could record the whole album without the drums and send it to the drummer, and then he could rehearse to those tracks. And the same thing without the vocals, without certain guitar parts and stuff like that. So everyone can rehearse on their own, and then when it's finally time to do the show, we get together and we do a couple of rehearsals in a country of one of the band members. We actually did the same thing with Rot Pit.
Mhm,
So because we have members spread out in Germany and Sweden, I recorded rehearsal tracks for everyone, and then when we got together, everyone was prepared and rehearsed, so we didn't have to spend hours and hours and hours in the rehearsal space,
mhm.
and everyone was super prepared. So when it came down to it, it was like we'd been playing in the rehearsal space for years and years together.
Hmm. Okay, okay. So one detail that I denoted for this never-ending night of terror is like that you bring this kind of influences or this new way to play like Wombat, because with keyboards, with synthesizers, more things related with this new one. And in some way, I try. Obviously, you are part of both albums or both records, and there is like way that in some way that I recognize you play your kind of play of method or your guitar method. That's completely normal with your influence and etc. So in this one, how do you avoid to sound in some parts as Wombat, but at the same time you try to create a new album for Heads for the Dead, because this never ending night terror bring me like a little vibe from the last album from Wombat.
Well, for me, it's quite easy actually because in when I write riffs for Wombath and when I write riffs for Heads for the Dead, I use the approach is completely different. So when I write songs for Wombath, I start off with the riff and then I build upon the riff, and then the riff gives me a feeling of where the song needs to go and where I want to take it. Whereas with Heads for the Dead, I start off with a movie or a movie soundtrack or a sound even, like a sound that sounds like something from a horror movie. And that will be the foundation for the song, and then I build the song around that. And uh, I think that separates the bands quite a lot. And at the same time, I mean, every songwriter has their unique things that they do. They put small details in riffs and songs, and you can't get away from that. So you always know who's writing the song because you can tell by their style of playing.
Okay. Other detail that capture my attention is like Wombat and Heads for the Dead is has well changed the label since transcending to now both are with pulverized records. So perhaps Heads for the Dead it was like a deal as Wombat entered to the pulverized Heads for Dead as you contact with Roy. Perhaps do you have an you sign with pulverized for this reason the same.
We actually signed with Heads for the Dead before Wombath for
Okay.
Pulver,
Okay.
but we did an album with Wombath about 10 years ago that was released by Pulverized.
Mhm.
And for whatever reason, we went on to different labels after that. But we always wanted to go back to Pulverized because everything worked so smoothly with them. And I know I've never worked with a label that is that easy to work with and that professional and puts that much detail and effort into their bands. So when we had a chance to sign with Heads for the Dead, it was a no-brainer for me. I was straight away figured that, of course, we should be on Pulverized. And as it then happened, when we signed with Heads for the Dead, we were working on some new songs with Woombath as well, and we didn't have a current contract with any label, so we took the chance and we asked the guys at Polarized if they wanted to release Woombath as well, and gladly they say yes.
Okay, okay, okay. So now, well, in this topic, and talking about more the concept of this never-ending night terror, because one thing that I denoted that is you try to tell an history here. So and that's when I listen this album like 5 or 6 times because it's a great album, and I try to relate this. It's not possible to relate. It's not a conceptual album. Perhaps this album is like the first concept album in the career for Heads of Career, because like each song is like it puts like a puzzle. When I hear the last song, the fourth song, there's like a meaning behind of this, and obviously the cover art like bring me back to the 80s with the 80s movies horror terror. So perhaps this album is a conceptual album.
Uh, uh, yeah, in a way, I wouldn't say it's full
Mhm.
on concept album. It's not like some albums that you will have like a true concept that goes from song to song, but
Mhm.
it's definitely leaning into that
Mhm.
because You have a very strong similarity between all of the movies, even though we've got inspiration from movies that span from the 60s all the way to like the late 80s. There's still like a common theme or a common ground for them, which was the biggest inspiration for this album. So I guess you could say it's a kind of a concept album. And even with as you said with the artwork, we spent loads and loads of time trying to find the right person to do the artwork as well, because we really wanted to have that hand painted late 70s, early 80s, mid 80s movie poster feeling to it. So when we finally saw some of this stuff that Solo Marcello had done, we were like, oh yeah, this is the guy for sure. And
Mhm.
kindly enough, he was happy to do the artwork for us.
Okay, okay, I understand. So now we're talking about more other kind of things and talking about especially for you lean down or your preference when you play music, because mostly all your records are leaned down to the death metal stuff. So now, so in this kind of situation, why are you decide to lean down to the death metal, and why not perhaps play a heavy metal, hard rock, not black metal, a different kind of style? So what brings you, what motivates you to create a death metal band or death metal bands when you have a lot of options? What for you is special that death metal has compared to another styles?
Well, death metal is the music that caught me, like really caught me. I was always interested in music. Even as a kid, I used to steal my dad's vinyl records and listen to them. And that was old like 1950s rock. Like you had Chuck Berry and you had Jerry Lee Lewis and stuff like that. And I loved it. But then I started getting into metal and I was like, yeah, this is really cool. This is really good. And then I heard death metal and it was just like an explosion in my brain. There was nothing like it. I had nothing I've ever heard before. And from that day on, death metal was the music that I knew the same second as I heard the first riff on that album. I knew that I'm gonna dedicate my life to death metal. So, I mean, it's the music. I listen to a lot of different types of music, but I'd say that 80% of the time when I listen to music, it is death metal. So it falls naturally for me to play it as well, because when I write music that I want to listen to. I create stuff that I would have wanted other bands to create. So death metal falls very easy into that category of stuff that I want to listen to.
Mm. Okay, okay. Interesting, interesting. So then, oh well, talking about more things related outside. So now we are living in a world that we have a lot of bands plays like the old days. It's like they remember the influence for the 80s, for the 90s, for the first wave, for the second wave of the death metal, and obviously more waves. So, but now with this new, as you come in from, for example, from Sweden or for the Scandinavian area, so you are like you have you all the time Sweden has a personal sound into the death metal. Now there is no more personal sounds in the world. You can see that we are continue, or the bands are, or the musicians are continue digging it in the old influence from UK, from US, from Sweden, Finland, and Brazil, like the most important five scenes when we're talking about the death metal. So in the future, do you think that some band or some country will rise with a new approach of the death metal, or we are continue to see the old influence in these new bands?
I think I think there will be. I don't think it might not be a country in particular that does it. I think it will be like a movement that will be across different countries.
Mhm.
Because if you look at like the European sound, if you exclude Finland, Norway, and Sweden from the European sound and the UK, and you take bands from let's say Poland and stuff like that, they they started doing a thing that wasn't really, you had some bands doing that kind of Black Death stuff that they're very good at doing, but
Mhm.
they took it even a step further. So it's not that far back since we had like a new wave of something coming in. And I think it's bound to happen again. But I don't think it's necessarily gonna be a specific country that does it. It's just gonna be a wave of bands from different places taking everything a step further. And I mean, there's bands now that have taken extreme metal. I would say it's not necessarily death metal, but extreme metal, and they've taken it even further to like, to me, it doesn't make much sense, but it doesn't really matter. It's really cool that they're taking it to that place and to those extremities, because the fact that an old fart like myself doesn't understand it, that just means that it's new and probably something fresh.
Mm. Okay, okay. So now talking about other kind of things related with, especially with new music industry. So the new, and obviously, as you can see, mostly all bands are retirement. So Megadeth did the retirement, Slayer did the retirement, like the bigger bands are retirement. Black Sabbath did the retirement, and obviously a lot of things happen during these recent years. And in the next years, we will continue see this topic that the great bands will continue retiring because, well, that is all completed. That's life, completed all, etc., etc. There's no time to play more gigs. So no. So for you, is there any way, or we will see a new band rise up for a mainstream level in the future, or now because now the metal is like living like the biggest concerts are living with the great bands, Metallica, etc., etc. But now we are supporting like the medium and smaller bands. But do you think that in the future will bring to us a new mainstream band, especially in the metal scene?
I think so. I think there's going to be bands that will rise up to the occasion, and I mean, every era comes and goes, and you have new young people that get into metal, and obviously with all the old legends that are legends to us, when they stop playing, those young fans aren't necessarily gonna look to let's say Iron Maiden or Metallica or any of those bands. They're gonna look at the new bands that are around then, and that is gonna help those bands grow. And it's hard to say if they're gonna be like arena big, like selling out Wembley or stuff like that, Madison Square Garden, but I definitely think that there's gonna be people filling the void.
Hmm. Okay, okay. So now that, as you can see, well, mostly when you have now a band, and now you have a second, a backup, because now as a musician with a lot of releases, with a lot of bands releasing per weekend, that's impossible to catch attention for everyone. And mostly the bigger bands like, or the bigger musicians like Nergal from Behemoth or Exodus from said that it says that music industry is dead, or obviously, or Behemoth or Nergal said that is you need to have a backup plan because you will not bring again the situation about the music industry. There's too musicians, there's too much bands. If you just play music, you will die. You will die, something like that. So in this kind of situation, do you think how will you will see now the futures in the music industry with all these kind of the digital platforms, no more physical stuff, and obviously the festivals are great, but no, there's no enough festivals for a lot of bands in the world.
It's a problem that because obviously the scene becomes very saturated and you get a lot of bands, really, 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 really good bands and talented musicians that don't get
Mhm.
the attention that they deserve. So that in itself is a problem. But again, I think that most bands that play in the extreme metal world, it's very, very few that actually live off the music. They have a day job and then they do the music as a passion on the side of their regular job. And as long as you have those kinds of bands, and there's a lot of those bands, there's going to be a movement flowing and it's going to continue to flow and it's going to continue to book festivals and I think just looking at festivals around Europe now, especially in like Germany and Holland and countries like that, you have so many smaller festivals that don't necessarily bring out the audiences of let's say Wacken or festivals like that, but they have a couple of thousand people attending them, and the bands you have playing there are bands that you would never see at Wacken, and it's really really great because that bring gets them on the springboard to become bigger. And so I think at least here in Europe there's a movement happening with smaller festivals that is booking smaller bands and having them on to make them the highlight of the festival and giving them a chance to showcase their stuff. And that in return will grow them and the bigger festivals will start noticing them and start booking them. So I
Mm.
think it all goes hand in hand. As long as we have passionate people within the scene that keeps putting on smaller bands, smaller festivals, as well as the people that do all the bigger festivals. It's just gonna, I think it's gonna keep growing. And I think smaller bands, even though the scene is very saturated and a lot of bands don't get the let's say let's call it fame that they're due, or recognition is a better word for it.
Okay, okay,
I
okay.
think that we're on a good path now.
Well, okay, okay, I understand. So now, well, with this kind of situation of the technology, the AI, and more things, we're talking about now about the algorithm. As you can see, it's like the algorithm are like don't like dominate obviously the social media because and mostly recommending new bands. And when you just click, then YouTube infected a lot of bands with the same sound, with the same etc. So, do you think in this kind of situation that the algorithm is a good or is bad for the new metalheads? Why is that? Because no for me I'm over 40 years old, so I understand that band is good, that band is not good. But the people are just listening to recommendations from the social media, the recommendation from the algorithms, and not time to find a great band around these all these bands.
I think, I mean, it's hard to say. I'm not an expert on how the algorithms work and all that AI stuff. But I think in a way with these algorithms, at least what I've noticed, this is my just my personal perspective for it and what I've observed is that once you start looking for a certain thing, the algorithm will provide you with a lot more of that thing. So if you take a kid that, let's say someone 12, 13, 14 years of age, and they're starting to like discover new cool death metal bands, for example.
Mhm.
Once they start actively searching for it, the algorithm is going to help them. But on the other hand, I do think that the algorithm is also tailored to the bigger names, so it can drown out some of the smaller bands. So it's good, but at the same time, it might be a bit detrimental for the smaller bands as well, unfortunately.
Hmm. Okay, okay. Well, we're very close to ending this interview, Johnny. And for this, well, other topic that is a lot of worry for the people is the overwhelming releases per weekend. There's no enough time for releases for to hear. Even we are working as a media, but there's too enough. There's a lot of releases per weekend. So now for all bands or is this or all musicians, they told me that it's saturated, but the new people say that it's good for the scene because we are releasing a new albums, new musicians, and the obviously the music, the metal music will continue perpetuate around the in the during years. And for your kind of view, where your point of view, what do you think about this one?
I think it's good. I mean, th we've gone from a time where you had to have money to be able to go into a studio to record stuff, and you had to pay for rehearsal space to be able to rehearse and get tight, and that whole bit is gone now. So if you have someone that is really, really good at writing songs and they're good at their instrument and they're productive and all of that, they have the opportunity to create something. And even though it might not necessarily become the next big thing, and it might even be drowned out in the massive flood of new releases, at least they get to be productive and they get to record their ideas and they get to play around with it and they get to evolve and become better and better. And I mean, it's with that, like with any thing that you set your mind to. If you set your mind to it thinking that, oh, I'm gonna become the biggest and the best at this, you're probably gonna fail and you're probably gonna give up. But if you do it for the right reasons, if you do it for the passion of the music or the passion of whatever thing that you're trying to create, then anything you do is a win because you get the time to write a new album, you can record the new album, you can record all the instruments yourself because you have digital software and you can have almost release ready album made in your bedroom, which is something that was unheard of, uh, let's say 15 years ago. You had bedroom releases then, but they sounded like utter crap. These days, you can have something that actually sounds pretty good, and it's
Right.
made in some kid's bedroom, and that to me is just amazing, and it's I think that's a win for everyone. And if you keep pushing yourself and keep doing what makes you feel happy and passionate about, then everything else is just background noise.
Okay, okay, okay. Well, well, Johnny, we are right to the sad moment of this interview. Thank you very much for your time. This, well, the last album for Wombat and this Heads for the Dead's amazing one. Thank you very much for this. And perhaps you wanna add something to your Latin American fans. Expect someday that who knows, who knows. I know that's a bit difficult because the band is like in different parts of the world, but who knows? Who knows? Who knows? And this one, perhaps you wanna add something to your Latin American fans and obviously Metallica followers.
Absolutely. I want to thank all of our Latin American fans for supporting the extreme underground metal scene and for everyone that buys physical stuff, t-shirts and then records and all that. And even just listening to us on streaming platforms and all the support is appreciated. Very, very appreciated.